Every injustice is a broken hallelujah to the spirit of life and love. 2 weeks ago, I talked about how circumstances in our nation and in our association raised our awareness of systemic forms of oppression and compelled us to reassess our values as Unitarian Universalists. It is through the gift of awareness we come to accept a reality other than our own, engage in a process of reconciliation or the renewal of our commitment to live more consciously and act more justly. The revision of the UUA's Article 2 bylaws is an effort to do just that. Founded as a living tradition where truth is ever unfolding, our UUA bylaws require a review of Article 2 every 15 years to ensure our principles remain relevant to the world and that no statement becomes a creed. There have been some historic changes reflected in Article 2 over the years. For example, Unitarianism was founded on a belief in the existence of one God, which was a radical departure from the widely held belief in the Trinity. Similarly, Universalism was founded on the belief of a loving God and the inherent goodness of humanity, which was also a radical departure from the contemporary belief in a punitive God and the total depravity of human nature. In more recent years, Article 2 reflected the values of the civil rights movement in 1961, when the Unitarians and the Universalists merged to become the UUA. And then in 1985, the Article 2 underwent a radical revision inspired by the women's movement. The UU Women's Federation separated the principles from the sources, removed sexist language in relation to God and humanity from our literature, bylaws, and hymnals, and increased support for women in the ministry. I think it was like 20% of ministers were female prior to 1985. And after this change, we effected an increase to 60% of ministers being female. As environmental awareness reached a critical mass in the 80s, a seventh principle was added in reference to the interdependent web of which we are a part. Our sources were also expanded beyond the Judeo-Christian tradition to include transcendentalism, humanism, and the world's religions. These are the principles and sources we have come to know and love. Over the last 4 decades, so review every 15 years, and over the last 4 decades, we have voted down nearly all of proposed changes to the principles and sources. Several attempts to revise them have been voted down at General Assembly. For instance, in 2009, there was much criticism about the fifth principle because our General Assemblies did not embody inclusive democratic processes. Only people who could afford to travel to attend GA were able to vote on important matters of the association. Thanks to the pandemic, that's been changed now. In 2010, there was an effort to revise the first principle to include the inherent worth and dignity of all beings instead of all people. In 2017, there was an effort to add an eighth principle to explicitly state our commitment to anti-racism and to dismantle structures of oppression. It was also an attempt to revise the seventh principle to read reverence for the interdependent web rather than respect, because people thought it would be more compelling to live in harmony with the earth. Happily, however, In 2017, the Assembly did approve to use gender-neutral language in the words and deeds of prophetic men and women to read prophetic people. In the last decade, however, there has been a resurgence of civil unrest with the Black Lives Matter movement in 2013 and the rise of nationalism and white supremacy in the Trump administration, and racist hiring practices in our own denomination. In light of these events, the UUA board charged the Article 2 Study Commission to articulate our core theological values and explicitly state our commitment to personal, institutional, and cultural change rooted in the values and practices of anti-oppression, anti-racism, and multiculturalism. The board recommended the commission identify love as one of our core values. And some of you may remember years ago, and perhaps still now, we used to refer to God as love. The commission also was charged to engage the active participation of UUs across all demographics, identities, ideologies, and beliefs through as many channels of communication as possible. As a result, 4,611 UUs participated in 45 online feedback sessions. 10,000, nearly 11, people responded to 29 surveys. And nearly 8,000 people viewed videos produced by the Commission on the proposed changes. The Commission was charged to, quote, propose any revisions that will enable our UUA, our member congregations, and our covenanted communities to be a relevant and powerful force for spiritual and moral growth, healing, and justice. Our commitment to anti-racism, anti-oppression, and multiculturalism is love in action, and it should be centered in the revision of Article 2. Since our association has grown in its understanding of systemic oppressions such as racism, ableism, and heteronormativity, the language of Article 2, in keeping with a living tradition, now reflects these learnings. And I just want to point out how our 7 principles were presented as a list of bullets, which is a very academic presentation, and how our 6 values are presented in the colorful form of a flower. I really liked the one that was made for the children because each petal was a different color, and here there's a lot of white. But a flower, a connection to nature, not academic. And if you look at the flower from a distance, it looks like a circle, which is an ancient symbol of community and inclusion, familiar to earth-centered traditions, neo-pagan traditions, and African-American traditions. You'll also notice the language of our 6 values is more action-oriented than the aspirational language of our 7 principles. It's hard to give up poetic language that encapsulates our values so well. But I promise you, these new values will guide us to being more conscious, more active, and more aware of people outside of our circle of concern and bring them toward the center. Dismantling racism, white supremacy, and other oppressions, however, requires work at a personal and institutional level. We cannot hope to build beloved community of diverse people united by love, mutual respect, and a pursuit of justice without conscious awareness and effort. And it's important to remember there is no rule that prevents us from referring to our 7 principles. It's still there. I want to invite now members of the Board of Trustees to come forward and join me on the steps as we share with you the full text of our values. Oh, I don't know. Stephen, are we all in order? We got to get our ducks or our pigs in a row. Yeah. You're awesome. Okay, we got a mic. Therefore, as Unitarian Universalists, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. Justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive.
We covenant. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systematic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make our decisions within our congregations, our association, and society at large.
Equity. We declare that every person has the right to flourish with inherent dignity and worthiness.
We covenant to the use of our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities.
Transformation. We adapt to a changing world.
Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritage. Never complete and never perfect.
Pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology.
We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect.
Interdependence. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. With reverence for the great web of life and with humility, we acknowledge our place in it.
We covenant to protect Earth and all beings from exploitation. We will create and nurture sustainable relationships of care and respect, mutuality and justice. We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships.
Generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope.
We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality.
Love. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values.
We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. And thanks to our children, oh, you're so cute. We now have this adorable little creature to help us remember each of our values. Thank you so much. Twentieth century theologian James Luther Adams reminds us, a living tradition is not bequeathed through some law of inheritance. It must be earned, not without dust and heat, and not without humbling grace. May it be so.